Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Cup of Joy with Elizabeth and Lane. I hope you all are enjoying as we proceed into spring. I just got back from Florida for the first time. I actually left rain in Florida, which was, not something you see a lot, but it was like raining for like a couple days straight, and actually came back to Columbus, Ohio, in which the weather here was better. So I escaped showers in Florida and came to sunshine in Ohio. So I'm living my best life. And so today we are in the personal well being category of our success spheres. Today we're focusing on the emotional component, although today's topic really truly permeates every area. And we talk about that in all of our episodes, right? And that's one of our intentional value adds with Joy Society is that we talk about the intersection of all of these areas of our lives. And so today we have a heavy topic, but I'm going to do my best to not make it heavy. We're going to be talking about sexual assault today because it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so I will say that I show up to today honoring all of you who are survivors of any form of sexual violence. And want you to know that as I hopefully stay light and airy, because that's the mood that I'm in. And it's really based on my actual celebration of how I show up to this conversation today versus how I have in the past. I know that there is such a thing as healing, while I also know this thing can wreak havoc in a lot of ways. So want to make sure you all know that we honor you however you're showing up today. I know what it's like to show up in straight darkness on this topic, and I know what it's like to find the light on the other side of this. So we are appreciative of the opportunity, and we do want to put a trigger warning out. Assuming you saw from the title, yes, we are talking about sexual violence today. So if that's something that has the potential to trigger you, please take care of yourself as you see fit. And we are doing things a little different today. So, Lane, I just went down the whole thing of what we're doing. But would you like to add anything?
Yeah, usually I'm the one to kick us off like that, but I'm glad that you did for today. I think that's appropriate. Today Liz is probably or is going to share some personal stories about sexual violence in her life. And so, this
And I
is
will, just so you
yeah,
all know, I'm not going to share the details of what happened to me. I'm going to share how it affected me, just so you
sure.
all are not like freaking out. I will not be troubling you with the
Yeah,
details that none of
this
us want to
isn't
relive.
the right. This isn't the place for that. And I
Yeah.
think that, the conversation really, as all of ours are about living a life that you enjoy and that
Mhm.
no matter, the things that the things that have happened to us in our life, like how can we heal from that? How can we move past that in a way that we can, you know, live an even more joyful life than we had even
Mhm.
prior to those experiences. So it's a story of hope. So I think just focusing more on that versus we all know how heavy this topic can be. And I
Mhm.
think that goes to the point of just the statistics and all the things that we could like just bombard you with about how common this is,
Mhm.
how unfortunately it is worse for certain groups of people. Like there's all these
Yeah. All the
statistics out
stats
there.
we
I
know and
think
hate.
if you could Google it easily, you can figure it out if you are truly curious about that. But I think this conversation is more about, what is it like for someone, um, for Liz specifically? How has this affected your life? How has this affected your work? How is this, how have you healed from this in ways that other members who might be or members, listeners, whoever you are out there listening to this, maybe have some kind of way of relating to this, if whether you've experienced it, maybe a friend has experienced it. Most of us know someone who has, if we haven't ourselves. So this story is about honoring those who have experienced it, spreading some awareness of different ways of healing. And
Mhm.
so, Liz, do you want to start us off just by like sharing a little bit about your story?
Yeah, and I unfortunately my my experience with sexual violence is really complex, and there are multiple experiences that I've had. And Whenever I've tried to outline sort of a journey, if I try to go through like a linear journey, it's really hard to do because there's the timeline of like actual events, but the emotional experience that was threaded through with this experience does not is not a linear experience at all. And so I'll just simply share on a high level that the two primary experience of sexual violence I had were being raped by a teacher in high school at age 16, as well as being sexually abused by my oldest brother for most of my childhood. So it's really been sort of this backstory for most of my life. As I recall, I think the original experience started around 8. So I unfortunately don't have a lot of memories of life without this being part of my storyline. And I will say in the beginning, for me, in my younger years with the experience with my brother, you would have never been able to tell because I maneuvered that very effectively from the perspective of, you may think maybe some acting out or dropping grades. There was no evidence whatsoever. No one had any idea, and this was an incident or an experience that happened multiple times over multiple years. Until I just finally decided one day I was going to like not allow myself to be alone in a room anymore, and then it stopped. And then the experience in high school was like a super over the top experience in that when the experience became public, I literally had to have police escorts for my safety because I had classmates threatening my life and wearing pins to school that said "not guilty" in support of the teacher who raped me. So again, quite an emotional journey over those years. And interestingly, I talk about this in my research with elite performers of how folks can encounter difficult life experiences and different people process them differently. Obviously, you all who are regular listeners know that Lena and I are both clinicians and have done coaching as well. And so we have seen behind the curtain, if you will, in multiple people's lives. And it's always interesting to see how different folks um, process trauma and difficult times differently. And so I think based on the fact that, we focus on how we bring holistic success and well-being conversations to professionals, leaders, entrepreneurs, and business owners, um, one of the things that stood out to me as I was on my journey of trying to figure out what the heck happened and how it was affecting me, which came way later, was in a book called The Courage to Heal. If you are a survivor and you're not aware of this book, it's the best book I've ever seen. It's a Bible. It's really, really deep. There's this, and then this author also has a book called Allies in Healing, which is written for the partners or spouses of survivors. And I actually found that book first before I found The Courage to Heal. And actually, I think it was in Allies in Healing where I can't remember which one, but nonetheless, one of the symptoms that in all of my years and conversations about sexual violence and how it affects you is perfectionism and workaholism.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of you who are regular listeners, that check for me, right? And so yeah, so like, we can certainly talk about all the negative ways in which sexual violence affects one, but I don't think anyone needs to be told that. This one's kind of interesting when you talk about the intersection of sexual violence and work and career, because I would say that some of the success that I experience today is absolutely tied to the drive that I tied to these experiences. Some of it was anger, and some of it was just a need to prove worthiness. And I only know this because I studied it, because I can't say I was walking around like, I need to prove I'm worthy, so therefore I have to work and do all these things and earn all these things and get all these degrees and have all these certifications. So, if you haven't studied sexual violence and how it affects you, and you are a survivor, one of the first things I want to recommend before we even get to that part, usually we try to say those things for the end, is to become an expert. And I talk about this in my book. Become an expert at the thing you survive. So if you haven't survived sexual violence, but you survived something else, we tend to, like, especially if it's like a really horrible experience, you tend to like not want to have anything to do with anything related to it. But I will tell you, one of the turning points for me earlier on, which started me on my healing journey, was to learn about it. Because what it did for me was help me understand myself. And in some cases, some of the what felt like crazy in my head was like, okay, that's normal. That's a response, right? And then in other things, oh crap, like I was like wearing this badge of being this high performer all of those years, and it made me reevaluate that to say I still feel proud to be someone who works hard and has you know as my lovely statue shows, push this ball up the hill, right? It's something I'm very proud of. But it did make me start checking in to see, like, what have I laced into that may be unhealthy. And I've talked in previous episodes about how I was so driven in my earlier years that it was a very imbalanced version
Mhm.
of success. Again, one of the things, probably the thing I would guess, that inspired how we show up with Joy Society, this holistic success, because over the time of going through the process of trying to find myself, I had to lose myself and lose everything I own. And I mean everything. 2 houses, 2 cars, was living my fake best life. And I say that because on the outside, I was amazing. And on the inside, I was a hot mess. But it took me losing all of that to find myself for the first time. And that began my healing journey because I was able to be quote unquote successful, right? While all this hot messiness was going on the inside. And it required that I lose everything to see myself for the first time. And so that was sort of the turning point for me in my healing journey. So hopefully you all are tracking. I can see, Lane, you have thoughts and questions. I'm going to pause, give you a moment to give some thoughts
Yeah.
or words or ask some things.
I mean, there's plenty more to share on that, I'm sure. And I'm curious, like, where you might go with how this has shown up in certain areas of your life over
Mhm,
your whole life. Because I
mhm,
think what's standing out for me too is like that your experiences happened when you were a child.
mhm,
And you know, these these experiences, sexual assault can happen at any point in a person's life.
mhm,
And I'm curious for you, how you think that might differ for people who have experienced something similar to what you experienced, where
mhm,
it's, they're an adult now, but this was a childhood trauma, and versus, someone who maybe experienced this later or as an adult or even a
mhm,
young adult. Like, there's just so many differences there, and how
mhm.
this might show up in the healing process itself too.
Yeah, actually, Lane, I think about a lot of things.
Yeah,
But
I
I've
know.
actually never really thought about the difference, or how the or maybe I haven't, I don't remember, but I don't recall any, and I don't have any like immediate thoughts on that. So before I answer though, I would say I want to just caution anyone, like, to we should never be comparing our stories either
Right.
with someone else who's experienced the same thing or with someone else who hasn't, because I've just seen over the years where people are like, oh, I'm not really holding a lot of space for myself because I know someone else had a much harder version of trauma than I did. And I just want to remind folks that, every experience is about how you encounter it and how you
Mhm.
process it. And every troublesome, problematic, hurtful experience deserves to be honored and given space. So I just want to throw that out there. But
Yeah.
I would say, just thinking from an expertise perspective, moving over into my clinician hat, I think for children in any trauma, you are still developing answers about who you are,
Mhm.
right, and your truth about yourself, others, in the world, in a very, very elementary way, right? In like the foundational kind of a way. So I think that one of the ways in which you may see a difference in impact would be for a child. There isn't, as I said earlier, I don't really have much of an identity that I can think about or capture outside of this experience. So it's some I have wondered, like, what would I am I how much different am I, or would I have been had this either never happened or happened later in life? And I don't ask that as like never happened because I wish it never would have happened, which I can understand people saying that, but I am at a point in my healing where I truly have found a way to not only heal, but I feel very um confident that there all of the gifts that I can take from this experience, I've taken, right, and they very much have been part of what gives me the skill sets and passion and authenticity that I have, that I'm able to show up to, whether it's a coaching client and even in organizational consulting and those projects that I've done. My ability to really sense where humans are in any scenario doesn't have to do with sexual assault, and it's not just from this experience, but any other challenging experience I've had. And this is what one of the other things I talk about in my book, in this concept I developed called Survivor to Aliver, is that when you move into this season of being an aliver, which means you're no longer defined by this historical experience, you are able to translate what the pain of it into resilience. You're able to translate it into empathy for yourself and others. And so there really is a gift in it. And I'd say that with respect for anyone who's like, F you, like there's no effing gift for me right now. And I honor that. If you never get there, I honor that. But that has been part of how, a core part of how I've healed from not just sexual violence, but other challenges in my life. I've shared some of the challenges I've had with my family, and that is, what is the perspective, right? Because there's nothing you can do to change the experience. It did happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the real healing work is in how you explore how it affects how you see yourself, others in the world,
Right.
and make sure that those definitions and perspectives you came up with are accurate. And when I say accurate, of course you think they're accurate or you wouldn't be thinking them, but we have to challenge ourselves to ask, right? So you may come out of an experience like this and say, I don't deserve to be loved, for an example. And at that time, you feel like that's true, right? But working through that and asking, is that truly accurate? Like, what is that based on? You would get to the answer of, no, actually, that is not true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you may conclude that the world is a dark, horrible place where everyone just gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true? Certainly, it's true that hurt shows up in the world, right? And I don't think anyone makes it through life without some sort of pain. Hell, you go through pain just coming through the birth canal, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, is it true that there's pain in the life experience? Absolutely. But whatever we seek, we find. So if you want to find the good in the world, you can find that too, right?
Mhm.
And so being able to shift that perspective, shift that focus, has been a very core component, again, not just for my survival of these various sexual violence experiences, but of my experience with my family and having to step away and step back from them, the breakups, whatever they were, right? Of just like, what am I thinking about this? How is it affecting how I'm thinking about myself? Do I need to adjust that? Because the answer is yes, if my perspective on it is tied to kind of keeping me in this broken space, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think that it definitely makes sense. And I think it relates to that concept of just being so defined by something that it's
Mhm.
like almost that feeling of pride, or that feeling of like a badge, like wearing it as a badge that you survived this. And I
Mhm.
think you're describing like the healing process for you required you to move past that, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit more about
Yeah.
that?
It's funny because as you said, I'm remembering I had this moment, for a long time. I became an expert at this, of course, initially um, for my own good, right? And then with a background as a behavioral health expert, right? You start
Mhm.
to find ways to leverage it. And really it became, it is the core of what I've developed for trauma informed care, and how we teach therapists and counselors across the country how to go about quality approaches that actually support folks in healing. But I remember, like, I was like in it, I wrote the book, and for a while, well, like when I first started my first business, it was a nonprofit, and my intent was to help survivors of sexual violence, which is very common. Like, folks who survive a thing tend to go back and help the people in the thing,
Yeah.
right? But I remember all these years, like, oh, man, I'm gonna, when the opening's there, I'm gonna be ready, right? And I'm gonna be known for this. And I actually coincidentally have my elementary best friend was also being sexually abused as a child. Neither one of us knew it. I moved away, and then I found her later to find that her stepdad was sexually abusing her, and he ended up taking his own life. And she does speaking and writes books, and she's like doing the thing I wanted to do, right? She's on it. That's all she does. But I had this aha one day because the Me Too movement came. I was like, oh my God, the Me Too movement is here. All my expertise and passion has a home.
Yeah.
Go and help all the people. And then I don't know what came over me, but I just had this moment where I was like, I don't want to be known. I don't want to be known as a sexual violence expert. And I'm not knocking those of you who are. I'm just telling you my experience. Like, I started realizing that it was going to go beyond my choice at that point. Cause like anytime you're in a career, like your whole point in going through your career is like you get more and more experience at a thing. You get some certifications, you get some degrees, you level up and you get promoted. And that becomes like your freaking, at your retirement party, they're like, Lane has done this thing for 50 years and she's the best who ever did it. You know what I mean? And it was just like, it's one thing when I was just doing it out of choice and wanting to, but I was like, I don't know, for me. And again, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do this, but I'm just saying for me, it was just like, like, I don't want to just be known for that, especially when I feel like what I started learning about healing applied to everyone. Because when I first started, I was saying this is for survivors of sexual violence. And the more I started thinking about the clients I was helping back then, I was like, this is the story of healing. This isn't just about the healing module and process that I developed can be applied to anyone. And I have now used it for, I don't know, 15 years with folks who have survived everything from sexual violence to are going through a hard time in their marriage, and are trying to fit, and we're kind of maneuvering how various life realities have impacted how they're showing up and seeing themselves, their relationship, whatever. And so I decided to zoom out, and so it was just like I started, and I think there was also more healing happening for me. And I remember the aha moment where I wasn't seeing myself through the lens, or my life through the lens of trauma anymore. Like and I didn't know it until it stopped. And I don't know how it stopped. It just was a long journey of healing and like removing this from the center of my identity. But I realized like, I'm the whole way I'm thinking about any said thing. And I'm not even talking about trauma. I'm just about life experiences, because this is what happens when you have these experiences, is that they become your lens. Like you literally see everything, just like we see life through the lens of our religion or through our race or through our gender, or, all of these different,
like an identity.
Yeah, it's an identity. Right. And so, I just remember one day I just was, and it wasn't even anything deep, but I just realized there was a difference in how I was processing the experience. And I started seeing more and more. And that's when I was able to identify like, oh, wow, this is what it looks like to just have a life and live a life and have a thought process that isn't rooted in this horrible journey that I had been on. Because I mean, everything from being, in a space of suicidal thoughts for many years to actually getting close to actually committing suicide. I mean, you name it. I got all the boxes checked of the hard stuff, right? But it was like, I really had just got to a point where it was so hard to be alive. and just swarming in the pain of it all, that it was like, I either got to end this or I got to figure out how to fix this, because I can't do this. Like, I cannot do this. And so that really is what pushed me. And I decided not to end my life because I loved my mom more than I love myself. And I just couldn't imagine what she would go through if I were to do that. So I was like,
Yeah.
well, I guess I can't do that. So I was like, well, I'm going to try this other thing. But if you read in my book, I have a letter that I wrote my mom, an email, and I was able to capture it. That I had no belief in myself that I was going to be able to do it, but I felt like it was the only thing I could try. Right. And so that was the beginning of this journey, that over time I got to this point where, it's not top of mind for me anymore. But I literally, like, when I look at my rape anniversary, I think it took me at least 10, maybe 13 years. I'm so thankful I can't even remember now, because I used to remember like exactly how long
Yeah.
it took before the anniversary date came and I didn't have like the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
Or then it got to the point where I was having a pretty decent day. And then it got to the point where I was like, holy crap, the anniversary date went by and I didn't realize it. It's like, okay,
Mm.
now we're talking healing, because I'm
Yeah.
not like, it used to be. I
Focused.
would just be feeling depressed about 1 month before, and I would just be feeling like crap and couldn't figure out why. Like, oh, the date's coming, right? So it's like this
Yeah.
slow journey of healing. And so I do want to point that out to folks, whether it's sexual violence or any other life challenge. It is a journey. You don't
Mhm.
just move on. But I also think it's important that we don't settle and think that life has to be hard because I had this thing happen forever. And this has to always be at the center of all my stuff. And this will always be an ankle weight in my life. Like,
Yeah.
we have the ability to shift that, but it does require work. It ain't just time. I will tell you that. Ain't nobody just healing because time passed. You gotta do the work for sure.
Yeah.
And I did a lot.
Right. I think you're just pointing out like the fact that wherever you are on the journey is where you are. And I think just to accept that, because you or not accept that that's where you are going to be forever. That's what I'm saying. But
Right.
to accept that that's where you are right now, and to honor that, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't force you even just said you had to you couldn't force the healing process. You had to come to a point of real, like, this is all I can do. I either
Mm-hmm.
have to not live anymore or do this healing journey. And
Mm-hmm.
so
Without any notification as to what date was that going to end.
yeah, exactly. There was
Because
no
there isn't a date.
timeline.
There
There
really
was
isn't.
no date.
Yeah.
And what is the healing journey? What does that mean for everyone? The timeline's different. It could be years, it could be months, it could be days. I mean, like, sexual violence truly and trauma in general, just like as a clinician, again, like, trauma is defined by the individual. It's not
Mhm.
so two people could experience the exact same thing, and one person could have a traumatic experience, and one person that could be a
Just
difficult day of
resiliently
their
push
life.
through. Yeah, and they just
Yeah,
push through. Yeah.
so,
Yep.
it could so I think to that point, it's just your story is an example of how it looks for one person, and but because you have experienced such traumatic things and healed from them and are where you are, like, your story is very inspiring and motivating and provides a lot of, like, just simple, like, education and resources for
Mhm.
people who are going through it wherever they are in their journey. So that's how
Yeah, I
I'm
think
yeah.
and I want to point out too, because like there's a lot of folks who I would say you've got folks who are like really struggling and just are knowingly struggling. And I think there's a lot of people who have quote unquote normalized. We talked about this recently in some of my recent ahas. By the way, I had another aha about a health reality that I just kind of started
Oh, really?
accepting. And then now it's better, right? Because I decide this is not like, I want something
Finding.
better,
Yeah.
right? And so I think there's a lot of folks who have experienced sexual violence. And again, any difficult life experience is going to not any life experience is affecting how you see yourself, others in the world, right?
Mhm.
Typically, if it's a difficult life experience, you're going to see a tendency to have some untruths laced in those
Yeah.
realities, right? And so I think a lot of folks have just normalized whatever the pain is, whatever the struggles are. They're like, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
Right. And so, um, and in some cases don't realize how much it is impacting their lives. And I'm thinking about in the career space,
Yeah.
I can think back to times where I would have breakdowns at work and have to kind of like hurry up and get myself out there because I just like started busting out crying. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't really want to tell people what this is all about. Um, Times where I was really in that anger space where I was just the queen, bitch, like all the time. I know people who know me now are like, you're always so, you're so light. Like, yeah, it's called work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I used to be that person that when I would walk in the room and somebody like the now me was in there, like be wondering why is it that you're so happy all the time? Why you all smiling and teeth in it and all that stuff? So like, you show up to work and so we have we have the people like what I explained earlier, where you're like
Mhm.
you've become a workaholic and you don't realize that some of your workaholism and your perfectionism has to do with how you emotionally process those sexual violence
Mhm.
experiences. And so we need to be perfect at everything to validate that,
Yeah.
we deserve the love we didn't get or get the proper love and attention that we didn't get, whatever.
Mhm.
And then other folks who are just kind of literally you're present, but you're not for not just
Mhm.
work, but maybe for life in general, because you left your body during that experience and you stay not really present in your body. And
Yeah.
that's a survival tactic you used, which is why I titled that book, You Survived, Now What? Because it's like you get to a point where the exact same skill sets that you develop to help you survive this stuff will be the ones that keep you stuck.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you've been quote unquote surviving for too long, because you're
Mhm.
doing the thing that worked and you absolutely had to do that thing back then. Like, so for me, and I still, I'm thinking maybe I will work on cussing less. Those people know the struggle's real. But actually, in real life, like cussing on the level that it's on was born during when I was
Mm.
sexually assaulted in high school. And it was all of the defending of myself that I had to do against all of my quote unquote friends and peers and all of the people who had comments and opinions about whether or not I
Yeah.
something happened to me or I did something out of choice or whatever. And so I just was pissed all the time. And it was like also kind of like this protection thing where cussing a lot just lets you know, like, you probably don't want this smoke because at the time I prayed, like, yeah, I'm gonna give this one to you, God, but the next one I'm gonna handle myself. And that
Yeah.
that was like a clear thing for me. It was an agreement. And I was like, I was walking around validly, like, please. And then I kind of, if I admit, I was like hoping somebody would try me
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I wanted an opportunity. And so cussing people out really just felt good. Honestly, it was like a way to get all that funky energy out.
Yeah.
Now it's just here. It doesn't have any it
It's a
doesn't
way
have
it's a way
any of the actual meaning behind it as when it started. Now I just cuss to be cussing.
yeah.
So maybe I'll work on it because it does remind me it's a leftover that I did use back then, and now it's kind of like you're keeping stuff in the fridge that's old, like you're not
Yeah.
gonna eat it. Like, why do you still have it? You know what I mean? But it's just like habit, so I still do it. But we all have like these different things that we've implemented, and a lot of this stuff you wouldn't realize so you actually like ask yourself, when did I start that? Oh, you know what? I was doing that because you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like the kind of guys or girls you date or people that you date or
Yeah.
the things you're into. Like I got really into any activity that was traditionally supposed to be only men good at it, and I would be good at it just because. And it took me
Yeah.
a long time to know I was even doing that. It's like,
Okay.
so I guess it's a thing.
Yeah.
Like, so
Like prove.
it took me a long time to figure out, like, I got beef because, like, I was, as you're a young girl, you're raised that, like, men are going to be the solution and they're going to take care of you and they're smarter and they're stronger. And then you go through life. And if your experiences didn't align with that for me, I was like, what? I was kind of
Yeah.
pissed. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
anyway, we have these experiences and the way we process them, we kind of come up with things to survive and/or protect ourselves from further harm. And so I had to go through a journey of looking at what were the things that I implemented to survive that absolutely served me at the time, but they were
Right.
getting to the point that not only were they not serving me, like in the cussing cases, I'd like to say it's not really harming me, although there's maybe some people who don't talk to me anymore because I cuss too much. But other than that,
Other than
there
that,
are
it's
other
pretty harmless.
there are other things that like not being able to receive love. Like it for a
Mhm.
long time, I could not date like a nice man. Oh my God. It just made me want to throw up. Like, you're
Yeah.
so nice, I'm never calling you again. Right. And so there's this protection thing you implement. But then when you get to the point where you really would actually potentially like to actually have real love, and there are unfortunately a lot of folks, especially women, whose pickers are broken AF because the history of sexual violence has you all confused about what love looks like and
Yeah.
how to be loved, don't know how to do it. I remember crying like, God, please, I don't want to be attracted to this kind of guy
Yeah.
anymore. But I couldn't like consciously, I knew it, but I couldn't
Yeah.
get myself shifted yet. So
Yeah.
anyway, it's just this journey of like being able to identify those things and then see, you know what, that thing doesn't serve me anymore.
Mhm.
What's a new way to think about that, a new way to do that, what have you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all of that. I mean, this is actually like in some ways a different conversation, even just between you and I, even though I
Yeah,
know
I
like
know we haven't really gone here, have we?
yeah, and like I know we've talked about it, but not in this way, not to this extent. But I'm curious, to like this week's theme is, personal, like so emotional, spiritual
Mhm,
well-being. Like, can you talk a little bit about how your spirituality has, because I know from knowing you that that was a big part of your
mhm,
healing.
mhm.
So how would you maybe describe that to listeners and how that has helped you?
Yeah, so I was raised Christian, and I have no beef with God or Christians, so y'all don't come for me. I know y'all will come in the DMs. I love y'all. And so that belief system and belief reality was very much a part of my earlier journey. But I think I've shared before, I encountered the book A Spiritual Solution to Every Problem by Wayne Dyer, which just busted it open for me. In moving from more of a religious approach to
Mhm.
spiritual realities, it moved me from that to more of a spiritual experience. And so, in many religions, not just Christianity, you're taught not to read other religions or other teachings that don't align with your religion. But that that book kind of opened me up to other readings, and they weren't
Mhm.
necessarily that they weren't Christian. They just were more on a spirit level. And so more of them aligned with Eastern traditions. And so, you all have all heard me talk about Eckhart Tolle. He's one of those authors that I came across, and I don't think he's not anti anything or pro anything that I know of. It's just more of a spiritual reality. And so I will absolutely say, um, my willingness to have the courage to leave religion behind and lean into spirituality and just allow things to come to me and move from this experience where so often the teaching was confusing AF, even though I had every version of the Bible possible, into just being able to really experience. And I would say by faith, like knowing in your spirit, like an answer really took me from my what I thought was healed into like true healing, because
Okay. Yeah.
it really opened things up for these concepts of letting go, which was huge for me. Concepts of openness, of non-attachment, of non-reaction. Again, many of those concepts in Tolle's book, those weren't I didn't have that concept or those ideas anywhere. And those are the same core concepts that I teach in coaching and workshops and all the things that I do. But without going too deep into it, I would say for sure that moving from a religious foundation to a spiritual engagement was
Yeah.
absolutely freeing for me. It's like it's like the difference from running around in the backyard, which is great, to like being able to float in the air in the sky anywhere in the universe.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
like
like, yeah,
I think it sounds like it gave you permission to think
yes, yes,
differently, which is what you
absolutely.
need when you're
Yeah.
healing because you're
Mhm.
stuck in kind of the same
Yeah.
thought processes, the same like ways that you look at the world, like these truths that you tell yourself. So,
Mhm.
a spiritual practice and engaging your spiritual well-being really can put you into a different world, basically,
Absolutely.
where you are more free to think of things in new ways and give you that grounding. Because for me, and in other healing journeys that I've gone on, like spirituality has been such a
Critical.
grounding, like it makes me feel, yeah, like makes me feel present in the world
Mhm.
in a way that like traumas and difficult experiences can make you feel like you're
Make
not
you wanna
in
run
the
from it and
world. Yeah,
disconnect. Yep.
right, right.
Mhm.
So just wanted to touch on that a little bit
I
too.
appreciate that because that is a key to the game for sure.
Yeah.
So, any other things, Lane, that you think I could share? You know, I could go on and on. I'm so passionate, not just about obviously this
Mhm.
topic is critical in my life. Unfortunately, I have multiple stories and multiple people and multiple scenarios in which I've experienced sexual violence. I do want to shout out all of the fellas. I see you. Many of you have shared your stories with me privately. At some point, we will have a guest, a male guest, and share because I honor that there's a whole extra set of challenges when you are a male survivor. Many of you all have never told. So I just want you to know I see you. And everything that I said today relates to you too. This is not just about women or whatever gender or identity you feel most comfortable with. I'm speaking to all of you, love and light to all of you. Please know from a woman who literally went through suicidal thoughts for many years and literally got to a point to having a gun in her mouth that she put there.
Mhm.
To when I say enjoy life in real life, I truly, truly, truly love my life. It's not perfect, but I really enjoy it. So I just want you all to know that um,
It's
wherever you
possible.
set the bar, you can go there. So please set it high. I encourage you to lean in and give yourself the best of everything. And we will see you on the next cup of joy. Take care.
Well, we'll see you soon.